do my review. It is the paired review to go with my Pride and Prejudice spoiler-free reviews. However, instead of doing the movie like I have done before, what I did is I found another book about Pride and Prejudice. It's essentially fan fiction, but it's really well done. It's a trilogy, and I just read the first book. It's called An Assembly Such as This. It's by Pamela Aidan, and this book specifically follows the beginning of Pride and Prejudice, from when the Netherfield tenants arrive to when they leave at Christmas. And this book follows Darcy's point of view, and it was very refreshing to get the story from that perspective. And it made for a really interesting read. While I didn't always agree with everything that was happening, I really liked what the kind of context it gave to Darcy's actions towards Elizabeth. I will move on from here to my likes and dislikes. I'm doing my normal 3 likes, 3 dislikes, and I'm going to start with my likes. The first of those is Darcy's perspective. So Darcy's perspective I found really refreshing just because it gave really good context about the interactions with Elizabeth and how everything was playing out and what specifically was going on in his mind while these interactions were occurring, and what was going on in his mind that triggered him to have these interactions with her. My second like is the pacing. If you didn't care for the pacing in Pride and Prejudice, you might like it in this first book a little bit more. It is a little bit quicker because Darcy is doing a lot more specific, like, physical activities. So there's parts of the book where there's a lot more action. It's not just sitting and talking like you did get with a lot of Pride and Prejudice. My third like is how much more deeply they explored the relationship between Darcy and his sister Georgiana. I loved that aspect of Darcy's character in the original book because it was, for a long time, it felt like his one, like, really redeeming quality. And in this book, it expands upon it, and the letters they end up writing back and forth in the book are just beautiful and heartwarming, and it really adds an extra dimension to his character. That's all for my likes. I'll move on to my dislikes. I have 3, starting with the first, which is some of Darcy's mannerisms seemed a little bit inconsistent with how he was portrayed in the first book. I could chalk this up to just like how the perspective is showing everything, but just a few things where we were in his mind seemed a little bit at odds with how stuff was explained in Pride and Prejudice, some of it being from him directly. Again, that could just be because they're written from different perspectives. However, it's just something I didn't enjoy the few times it came up. The second thing I didn't really care for were the social scenes in London, specifically the one party that Darcy takes Bingley to kind of try to get him over Jane. Mostly because it just seemed kind of unnecessary. Like, I really don't know how else to explain it. It just felt like that's the part of the book that dragged for me, was like dealing with that and like the fallout and the lead up and all that junk. It just was not a favorite part of the book for me. And then my third dislike was actually Carolyn Bingley. In the Pride and Prejudice, while she does seem kind of mercenary in her pursuit of Darcy, in this book, her pursuit of him, while still mercenary, seems a lot more calculated and malicious almost. And I don't know if it's, again, just his perspective viewing this woman who he's clearly not at all interested in pursuing him like this, and that's making him uncomfortable, and that's what's adding this kind of taint to the tone that he has when you're talking to her. I really don't know, but I found her to be that much more abrasive and a lot less enjoyable in this book. That's all for my likes and my dislikes. I will move forward with my characters. Alright, so I will start with Charles Bingley. He's still Darcy's best friend, and he still has most of the characteristics and kind of mannerisms that he has in Pride and Prejudice. However, the one big thing I didn't really care for with him that seems to have changed, and I don't know if it's necessarily changed or this is just revealed, but the way he looks at his sisters is a lot more negative here than it was in Pride and Prejudice. In Pride and Prejudice, it seems like, though he didn't necessarily... In Pride and Prejudice, he seemed a lot more oblivious to their faults and seemed a lot more accepting and loving of them, whereas in this book, he's a lot more kind of like sarcastic and, you know, disagreeable when he's kind of talking to Darcy about his sisters, especially Carolyn. And it was very strange to see that shift. While it wasn't entirely surprising that that would be something that he would think, I found it very at odds with how it was presented in Pride and Prejudice. Next, I'll talk about Fitzwilliam Darcy. He's the man of the hour, the main character in this novel, and with the exception of the few kind of mannerisms that seemed inconsistent with what were presented in Pride and Prejudice, I actually really enjoyed his character. He came off as a lot more thoughtful, a lot less brooding, but a lot more shy. And to me, that made him a lot more likable, and any faults that I found with his character were really redeemed to me with how he interacted with his sister and the letters that he wrote to her and that she wrote back, and just the very obvious, loving, caring relationship they had. And I just adored that was explored more from his perspective, and I loved that I got to see that from him. The side characters, for the most part, play kind of the same developmental role. They play the same developmental role that they did in Pride and Prejudice. It's just they're from a different perspective, so there's a little bit more distaste and disgust in terms of certain people and how they're interacting with others. And again, just how he's viewing Carolyn is very different than how you think she's being viewed in Pride and Prejudice. And that's really all I have to say about the book. An assembly such as this was a really good novel. It was quick, it was short, it added a fresh perspective on a well-loved book, and I think it did a very good job of trying to represent the other side of the story. I'm definitely going to try to keep an eye out for the other parts of this, the other installments in this series. I think Pamela Aidan did a really good job with it. And that allows me to give this book a 4 out of 5 as an overall score. I'm not really going to score it as an adaptation of Pride and Prejudice, mostly because it's a lot. I don't feel it's necessarily fair to do that the way I do it with movies. So I'm just going to give it the 1 rating, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye.